Let us break through your wall with our giant laser. Let's destroy our fields with our giant country. We're gonna make that old lady cry, 'cause we're going to destroy her house, and we're not going to pay for anything.
So, welcome back to Kino's Kino, our weekly review of the 2017 adaptation of Kino's Journey, where each week we ask, is it Kino? Is this episode of Kino's Journey Kino? And we'll get to that. We'll get to our decision of whether this episode is Kino or not. But one thing has to be addressed first. The elephant in the room here. Not the elephant on the mural on the side of the traveling country. The elephant in this room. That was supposed to be the elephant? Yeah, there are elephants.
Oh, I must have not noticed the elephants.
How do you not notice the elephants? They're so big.
Wait, so those... I don't know. For some reason, I thought those weren't elephants. I thought it was just some, ambiguous, figure. I don't know.
They were clearly... It doesn't matter.
I didn't look at it hard enough.
We need to address the stories they're adapting in this new Kino's Journey and the implications for this adaptation because of that. Because the stories that have been chosen to be animated in this new adaptation were chosen by readers in a favorite country poll. So, right away, only countries were considered, not stories. Not the stories as a whole. So that story where it was about, the train track guys, there were these 3 sets of train tracks, or the 3 people working on these train tracks. Stories like that won't be in this adaptation, because it was only about countries. It was only about the countries that the readers liked the most. And then you have to consider, what countries would the readers like the most? What countries would Six Sawa's readers like best? And clearly the answer is...
The dark and violent ones.
The dark, violent, cruel ones. So, all the stories that are going to be in this adaptation are very likely going to be the most cruel and nihilistic countries. The ones that cause a lot of destruction, pain, suffering, debt. And very likely also to feature Kino firing guns to solve her problem.
Honestly, I feel somewhat inclined to actually go ahead and read all these stories, because they did release a list of all the stories that are going to be adapted, and all of them are ones that I can hunt down translations for, except for one of them, which is from volume 20. So I kind of want to go read them to see if they're actually all going to be dark and violent.
I don't want to spoil myself for any of the new stories, so I don't want to go and do that. But I am now very concerned about the overall tone of this adaptation, because 2 episodes in a row, we have Kino firing a gun to solve her problems.
Yeah.
She doesn't kill anyone in this episode, but she destroys a bunch of laser beams by shooting a rifle.
Her viewpoints are also clearly very different than it was in the last episode, because last episode is a story from Volume 1. This story is a story from Volume 7. And yes, Kino's Journey is an episodic story, but Kino is clearly learning more about countries that she's going on. The beginning of the series is her starting out on her journey, or very early on, and over time she's learning more about cultures and learning to be more accepting of cultures and not getting involved in them. So you go from something from Volume 1 where she's going so much on impulse, and then you're going to a story from Volume 7 where by this point she's kind of learned, hey, I should kind of stand back and look from an objective perspective on what this country is doing. So, from just how it flows, it feels very jarring. Because it feels like you have 2 different Kinos in the span of 1 episode.
I feel like her characterization is just completely different in this adaptation.
I don't know about that. I think it's just the fact that it's being adapted in this way. Because, I don't know, you were mentioning to me before that Kino seems naive. But I don't think she's being naive in this episode. I think she's just trying to not go to an immediate judgment of what this country is doing is bad.
I think that is naivete. I mean, she's
No,
very
that's not-
trusting about these countries.
That's not naivete, though. That's
Yeah,
her
that
being-
is. That is literally naivete. That is like, oh, maybe this isn't so bad. Clearly.
No, she's trying to think from their perspective. She doesn't want to hinder their country because of her own beliefs.
Well, she didn't have a problem with that in the last episode.
Except you're forgetting what I was saying. That's from Volume 1. That's from early in her journey. Over time, she's learning to be more objective about these countries.
Sure. But that's the problem with this adaptation, is that we got that inconsistency
Yeah,
in her character.
that's what I was saying before, Sid. That jumping from a story from Volume 1 and then going to a story from Volume 7 doesn't work. It makes us feel like there's two different Kinos in this adaptation.
I understand what you're saying. That doesn't mean that I can appreciate this episode more. In fact...
Oh, no, I'm not saying that you have to appreciate this episode more. That was a criticism of this episode. I wasn't defending the episode.
That's good.
I was criticizing the adaptation for doing this because it doesn't work.
It's not like I don't find the story fun. I like the idea of the traveling country.
This is the
it's
thing.
really cool. I like the idea of this really big country that's on wheels. They're traveling around because they like seeing the sights, and they're just a nomadic people, and they have this big dome of a country, and they are just all nice and happy in the country. Like, they're a very peaceful country, but they don't care at all about the destruction that they cause. I mean, they are a little sorry, but they're like, what can we do about it? It's only natural. Hey, all countries cause problems for each other just by existing, right? And that's such an irresponsible attitude, especially with the main conflict of this episode. We have the traveling country, and we have country behind a wall, right? So the traveling country is saying, hey, open up your wall so we can travel through it and destroy all the homes in our path. You can just evacuate, right? You can just tear down your wall that you had worked so hard to build, right? And they're like, no, we can't do that. That's violating our rights as a country. And the traveling country is like, oh, but we can't go around because your wall is so big. So we're just going to fire our laser to destroy your wall. And then we're just going to travel through your country. And we don't care about all the homes we're going to crush on our path. You know, we're going to want you to evacuate all your people. We don't want to kill anyone. But like, we're also not gonna, minimize the amount of damage that we're causing. We're not gonna put in some effort to, maybe we could, back up and shift course, Maybe we don't have to go in a straight line.
But Sid, they chose that one patch of grass to minimize the amount of destruction.
They still destroyed at least one home. That is still someone's home! And the most irresponsible, jerkish thing of all is at the end of the travel, the general's like, okay, you guys are leaving now. You screwed up our country. You destroyed it. But at the very least, the nice thing to do, the honorable, decent thing to do would be to pay for the damages. And they're like, no, sorry, we can't do that. You can just go, screw off. Well, that is such an irresponsible, terrible attitude. I don't understand at all the moral of this story. Because both of these countries were supposed to be in the wrong, apparently. They were supposed to be the Bothersome countries. But clearly, the traveling country was in the wrong. Because they could so easily have not destroyed this place. They could have so easily just went around it.
Yeah, it's not like they have to go to the country. The whole point is them just traveling around so everyone experiences different environments. You don't have to go into the country for one day, destroy a bunch of homes, and then leave to enrich their traveling experience.
Yeah, at least pay for the damage you caused.
Then just don't break open the wall. Just go around the country, around the wall, and just look from the landscape from behind the wall. Your country's big enough that you can see above the wall.
The traveling country would have been more sympathetic if they couldn't have changed course, if we knew that they couldn't for some reason, if they couldn't have stopped their country for a long period of time. Because they explained that they can't stop the country for a long period of time because otherwise it'll blow up or something. But if they could not, go in any direction but a straight line, if they didn't have a literal laser, if they didn't have weapons in which they were inflicting damage and hostilities on other countries, then they would be more sympathetic. If literally all they could do was, like, go in the straight line, warn people that they were coming, and then crash into the wall because that's all they could do, they would be more sympathetic.
I feel very conflicted on this episode, because, like, yeah, sure, like, the whole thing in Kino's journey is that a lot of these countries aren't necessarily morally right, but going from this episode from last episode just wasn't a good choice.
The biggest problem is that Kino is on the country's side.
Kino feels like a totally different character.
Yeah, Kino totally ignores the criticisms against the country that they are trampling on other countries' rights and causing destruction in their wake. And they're just saying, oh, we're sorry about that. It's not good enough. Like, she completely ignores that part. And she helps the country out by destroying the other country's lasers. So, I feel this episode would work a lot better in the original anime, where, like, there was never really any stories in the original anime that they adapted that were ones where Kino actually has a very strong conviction about countries. Like, she was always very much neutral, even in Colosseum, because they readapted Colosseum in a way that made her neutral. Yeah. Like, if she did not get involved at all, if she didn't help the country, it would be a lot better. If she was just, okay, I'm going to sit back and observe how they do things, and then make a judgment of whether I want to stay here any longer, that would be fine. But she helps the country out. She destroys the laser cannons of the other country. And all they were doing, the only damage they were really doing to the country was that she was destroying the kids' murals.
Maybe she wanted to make the kids happy.
I mean, I know Kino has a soft spot for kids. But at the same time, you're destroying property of another country. At the very least, she didn't
kill anyone. That's a good thing. She just, like, destroyed the machinery.
Yeah, but this is a huge macro aggression against this country.
Yeah, it's like,
Like, even if the country itself is supposed to not be a great country, because at the end Hermes is saying they were having such a high toll to pass through the wall and all of that stuff, that the country was extorting people from the outside, and that their wall was unjust or something. Clearly, though, the guys in the wrong was the traveling country, because they just literally did not care at all. They did not really actually try diplomacy. They just said, hey, we're gonna crash through. You can't do anything about it. Just step aside. That's not diplomacy. Yeah, if this episode did not present the traveling country as in the right, I would be more receptive to it, but it did. And that's where the problem is, because the moral is so confusing, misguided. It's saying you can cause as much destruction as you want as long as you are aware of the destruction you're causing, are apologetic about it, and try your best not to get people hurt if you can. That's not good enough. That is not good enough.
Honestly, like, if they were gonna adapt this story, they really should have waited till later in the anime. I don't know. It just feels like the message of this episode feels like it completely goes against the message of the last one. I think, why didn't they just go in chronological order with these, like, stories? Like, they're jumping around, which is just such a strange thing to do. Like, sure, Kino is episodic.
I don't think there are that many stories from earlier in this point that they're going to adapt, aside from Kino's backstory.
Kino's backstory, and then... Even then, this is from Volume 7.
Yeah, but...
This is, like, the latest, like, one of the very, like, late stories that they're adapting.
No, they're adapting, like, all through, right?
Yeah, they're adapting all through, but this is one of the later ones that they're adapting. They still have ones from, like, Volume 4 and 5, I think, that they're adapting.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna have the list right here.
I don't know what order they have in mind, what they're trying to get across, because the order of stories in the original anime was so on point, and how much we learnt about Kino.
They're all around the same area of stories, so they all, like, felt the same in terms of Kino's character, and they just all flow together well. They knew, like, what stories to put where.
Yeah,
this one
but here
feels
they're just
arbitrary.
Yeah, it feels arbitrary, and it just makes Kino's characterization inconsistent. And also, because they're all about the destructive countries, and all about the ones where Kino shoots people, or shoots her gun, and there's a lot of violence and military stuff. It's just the whole idea of the beautiful world of Kino's Journey, the variety in that world
becomes the destructive world.
It's been condensed. It's been specified, pigeonholed into just one type of story, one type of country, really. Just the militaristic, oppressive, militaristic, destructive kind of country, and not any of these other type of countries that were so interesting to explore in the original, and now we don't get that.
Yeah, so I have the list of stories that they're adapting. So there's 2 stories from Volume 1, so Colosseum Country of Adults, then 1 story from Volume 2, 1 story from Volume 3, 1 story from Volume 5, 2 stories from Volume 7, 2 stories from Volume 8, 1 story from Volume 9, 1 story from Volume 20, because for some reason they jumped to Volume 20 for some reason.
Again, it's a fan poll of the most popular countries.
Skipping 11 volumes of material. Great idea! Then various countries from Volumes 9 through 17, which I'm implying is going to be like a clip show style episode where it's kind of like a best of countries.
Honestly, I'm concerned that the original light novel series has a characterization of Kino and the world more akin to what we're seeing in this anime. What the original anime showed was a smarter adaptation of great concepts that were made much more interesting as an adaptation.
As a person who's read a fair bit of the light novels, I'd say it's, for the most part, what the anime adapted, the original anime, was pretty faithful to the actual light novel stories, aside from Colosseum. Like, Colosseum was the only one where they really took a ton of liberty. The other liberties are mainly, like, directorial. Like, how they actually present the material. I just feel that what we're seeing here is the fact that they're jumping around so much that you can't get a consistency with the character of Kino, because it doesn't work. Like, in the original, anime, you did have, like, stories from, like, Volumes 5 and Volume 6 and stuff, but the main group of stories were from that, like, Volumes 1 through 3. And the stories that they were, like, going from, like, the later volumes were ones that kind of felt thematically similar to those early stories. So they were, I think, being a lot more, like, wise about what stories they were adapting when they weren't adapting chronologically. Here, you're not adapting chronologically, but you're also not adapting with the themes, like, so that the themes actually feel natural together. Here, you're arbitrarily taking the stories based on fan demand and shoving them together. And you're not even doing it chronologically, so it just doesn't make sense.
And what the fans chose isn't really a variety of different stories.
What the fans chose are a very, like, narrow perception of Kino's Journey.
Yeah, very specific tastes.
Yeah.
Very specific kinds of stories. And that's unfortunate, because I was expecting something more akin to the original anime, and we're not getting that with this one.
Yeah. If the directors and writers were choosing their own stories, I think we might have.
It would have been more palatable if the presentation was as strong as the original, but it's not. It just feels so much blander with character designs, with the presentation of the worlds, because the fantasy, folk arty look of the original was so much of its appeal. The fact that it felt like kind of a picture book-esque depiction of, like, these places, and in here, they just look like normal places. There's nothing distinctive about them. There's no distinct air to this world. It just feels like generic anime setting.
I think the part of it's also just the stories that they're choosing. They aren't, like, choosing, like, the stories where Kino is, like, seeing these very, like, diverse-looking countries.
Yeah, I'm talking about the aesthetic presentation now. We're past the narrative thing.
Well, yeah, I know that, but this also comes down to what they're adapting, though. I don't know, like, based on what they're adapting, these aren't stories that really have unique art to begin with.
They could have made the traveling country and the country behind the wall way more visually interesting than what they did with this episode. I have no doubt in my mind that if the 2003 anime had adapted this story, those countries would have looked really unique and really memorable. Here, yeah, the traveling zone is memorable, but it's not something that I feel I could only see in Kino's Journey. I don't think that I could really see any of the locations of the original Kino's Journey in any other anime. Not in the way that they were depicted aesthetically. But here, this could be in any anime. I feel any modern anime.
Okay, that's fair. I'm just saying, though, if they're just going off based on descriptions of what are in the light novels, which they probably are, because, let's face it, anime adaptations nowadays are just a lot less willing to take liberties.
Yeah, I don't think we can excuse that, though.
I don't think we can excuse that, but I'm also saying...
I don't want to excuse them for being uninspired, because the original anime was inspired.
Well, yeah.
You know, we saw it with the Colosseum story. How much more interesting was the Colosseum in the original 2003 anime? It looked so much more interesting. The character designs of the king and the citizens were so much more interesting. The character designs of the king in this new version was just
I get the point, Sid. I watched this episode way more recently than you.
What are you talking
about? The Colosseum
about?
Episode.
I rewatched the Colosseum episodes from the original and the Colosseum episode.
Okay,
from
you don't get
the
pissed
new
off.
one.
Okay, whatever.
Why are you getting so defensive?
You're getting defensive too.
I'm trying to spark an argument here. Well, I'm trying to make my case.
You're just getting mad at this point.
What? Yes, I'm getting mad because I think that this adaptation is uninspired.
Yeah, okay, I'll fully admit that. It is uninspired. But that's just the sad truth of what the anime industry has become. It's become just overused with adaptations and not actually taking chances with these adaptations.
Well, my complaint is that you say "but" as if that's
I'm not saying it's acceptance. I didn't say it's acceptance. Did I say acceptance? No, exactly. Yeah, so that I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that that's the reality here.
Well, I don't like the reality. The reality isn't good enough for me, so I'm going to complain about it.
Yeah, that's fair. But going back to what you were saying earlier about this, maybe it's a problem with the light novels themselves. I don't think it's a problem with the light novels itself. It's just the fact that they're adapting them just not the right way.
And I can agree with that.
Yeah, even though you haven't read enough of the light novels.
Whatever. I'll read them after the anime finishes,
yeah,
because
right.
I definitely am interested. It would be better if it was legally available. Because I only really enjoy consuming legally available media more out of convenience, but also out of moral obligation. Mostly the convenience factor.
I mean, it's not licensed, so... Yeah.
Exactly.
Blame Tokyo Pop for only releasing one volume, and Tokyo Pop's taboo, because people don't like bringing back their stuff.
And that's the big shame, because this adaptation is our chance to get exposure to these stories that we wouldn't see legally because we're not getting the light novels. But the ones being chosen aren't the most interesting necessarily, and it's not being adapted in the most interesting way. Not in the best way they could be.
Yeah, and that's definitely a shame. And honestly, I do want someone like Young Press to license the novels, because that's what I care about. When this got announced, it was not less like, oh, hey, more Kino's Journey. It's like, oh, hey, a chance of getting the novels. Because at the end of the day, the animes don't get adapt so much. What I really want is the novels.
I would have liked both. I would have liked a great adaptation of the Kino's Journey light novels as anime, and I would have liked the English localization of the light novels.
Yeah, both would be ideal.
So we have to answer the question, right? Is this episode of Kino's Journey Kino?
No, it's not Kino. I can't say it's Kino. Maybe if this was adapted a different time, maybe it was adapted like later in the anime, or if this was adapted in the original anime, I'd probably consider it Kino, just because it fits more tonally, but in this context, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So it's not.
Yeah, it wasn't Kino. As much as I criticize it, I do want to say that I did enjoy watching the episode.
Well, yeah, I
thought it was a fun premise.
It's a good episode, but it doesn't fit in this context. Like, with the episodes we've currently been presented, this doesn't work. It just feels, like, jarring compared to the previous episode.
Yeah, the moral is jumbled, and tonally it feels inconsistent with the previous episode. I can only hope for better from the next episode. Maybe they won't all be militaristic. Maybe they won't all be about countries that cause wanton destruction or allow people to, like, hurt each other in damaging ways or any of that.
I mean, looking at the title, all these don't seem like violent countries at all.
But did traveling countries / Bothersome countries seem like it was going to be a violent place?
It's called the Troublesome Country, so that kind of means trouble.
Well, not necessarily because it's violent. It could be troublesome because they're a money-grubbing place, like that planet in Dragon Ball GT, which extorted the heck out of you. I wonder how come we haven't seen a story like that in Kino's Journey yet. Maybe there has been in the light novels.
Yeah, I'm gonna go read or reread like some of these stories just to check, because most of these don't seem like bad countries. Like,
well, don't judge a country by its title.
The grassland for the sheep. Actually, no, that could probably be contexted in some violent way.
Lord, does Land of Adults, just by the title, seem like it's going to be a bad place?
Yeah, you have a point there.
Right. Titles are not a good descriptor.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go read these stories.
Yeah, that is a good idea. But we are also going to keep watching along every week, whether this adaptation ultimately satisfies or disappoints us.
That's probably going to be in the middle.
Well, I hope it'll be in the middle and not worse.
I honestly can't imagine how it would actually make me hate Kino's Journey.
Well, I'm going to be optimistic like 2003 anime Kino and look at the beauty in the adaptation and the beauty of the world.
Yeah, but you're
and hope
more
for the best.
Negative stuff based on this episode.
Well, that could change if the next episode's better.
Right,
Who knows?
That's what they all say.
Well, they all say it because it's true. Unless it's the land of majority rule. One thing I also want to note before we leave off, though, is I noticed finally in the opening that they hint at all the characters' backstories when they're showing the montage of the characters, the supporting characters. So, like, we see, like, a silhouette of the king in Shizu, and then some other locations with the other characters. And then in the guns, we see reflected Kino's master and then someone else. I don't know who that is. So that's interesting. I just noticed that. Pretty cool. I'm interested in meeting all these new characters that are going to show up, and I'm interested in the episodes where Shizu and Riku are going to be a part of.
Part of me is wondering, like, are they just going to randomly show up and, like, pretend that we already know them?
I don't think so.
Because they're adapting fan-favorite chapters.
Maybe those fan-favorite chapters will include the ones where those characters are in.
Yeah, but, like, they aren't... I'm assuming not all of them are going to be intro chapters, like, with Shizu.
Well, maybe they just happen to be by pure coincidence.
That would be weird, but yeah, who knows?
Well, that's interesting. That's something to look forward to. See? Optimism. Look on the bright side.
Yes, the one piece of optimism in this episode.
Look on the bright side, but don't let it distract you from the bad things that are happening.
There's the pessimist.
See, this is the lesson that those people in the traveling country should have learned. That, yeah, the world is pretty beautiful. Enjoy that, but, maybe try a little harder to do something about all the damage you're causing.
Yeah, don't destroy innocent people's homes, but you could easily go around them.
Yeah, that's a moral to live by for sure. But until next week, I hope all you listeners at home have a beautiful day.